Hey everybody, this is Benjamin Pryor coming to you today to talk about the Scopes Monkey trial. Now, what I find really interesting about the Scopes Monkey trial is it's not only a prime example of fundamentalist versus modernist debate, but it also shows exactly how great of a defense attorney Clarence Darrow was in his defense of John Scopes. All right, so to set the scene, it's July 10th, 1925 in Dayton, Tennessee. Now, of course, the middle of the summer, there's no air conditioning, but people flock into Tennessee for this famous trial. And on trial is John Scopes. He's a young high school teacher who's been accused of teaching evolution. Now, according to state law that was passed in March, no teacher is allowed to teach anything other than biblical creationism. And they were not allowed to teach that man was derived from any kind of lower life form. And yet, John Scopes sees this law as unconstitutional and he intentionally violates it to show that the law is unconstitutional. So he gets arrested and is put on trial, and he calls the American Civil Liberties Union, and Clarence Darrow volunteers to take over the case. And for the prosecution, fundamentalist strongman William Jennings Bryan, a three-time Democratic presidential candidate, steps up for the prosecution. And it's almost the trial of the century, even though we haven't even gotten, we're a quarter of the way through the century, and it's already the trial of the century. So they meet in this courthouse, and early on, the defense suffers some major setbacks. Number one, Clarence Darrow is unable to get the judge to stop opening the court in prayer, which he says automatically goes against his client. Number two, he's denied the ability to have any kind of scientific evidence or testimony because the judge says, no, the law isn't on trial, your client is. So Darrow is already suffering some major setbacks. But then going into it, he decides to kind of change focus a little bit, and he switches things around. And instead of trying to defend his client, he figures out a way to attack the fundamentalist law. And the way he does that is he starts attacking William Jennings Bryan. So Bryan is this fundamentalist hero for Christianity. If you remember in the 1896 presidential election, he had his cross of gold against McKinley. So Bryan has used biblical imagery throughout his entire political career. So he is this really strong man for the fundamentalist cause. And yet when he steps up on the stand as a witness for Christianity, Clarence Darrow knows exactly the questions to ask that start poking holes in Bryan's belief that only biblical creationism can be taught. And he starts to include science in there simply by refuting Bryan. And the way that the trial ends up coming out is his client is still convicted, forced to pay a $100 fine, but the way that Darrow does this is he goes into his closing arguments, and this is his final attack on Christian fundamentalism in the United States, is during his closing arguments, he actually tells the jury to find his client guilty so that he can argue it on appeal. He actually asked for a guilty plea for his own client. And according to Tennessee state law, that actually negated the prosecution's closing statements. And William Jennings Bryan had this massive speech all about the importance of Christianity, the importance of it leading our country and our government, and he was unable to give it. And it really took the wind out of his sails. So even though William Jennings Bryan ends up winning the case, Christian fundamentalism in the United States ends up losing massively. And just 5 days later, William Jennings Bryan lays down for a nap and never wakes up. It was quite literally the last thing that he did, and many people say that, yes, while he had diabetes and that was actually the technical cause of death, that he died from a broken heart because he couldn't defend his faith the way that he felt that he should have. So it really shows this beginning separation between the United States government and the Christian faith, and it starts getting more into a modernist or secular government and laws based on secular beliefs. Thank you.